So, when I say John the Baptist, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that classic image, right? A wild man out in the desert, wearing camel's hair, eating locusts and wild honey. He's this iconic figure from the Bible, the guy who baptized Jesus.
And then, of course, there's that line. That absolutely chilling request. This is the image that really seals the deal in our minds, isn't it? His gruesome, dramatic end, served up on a platter. It's a scene that feels like it was written for the big screen.
The story we all know seems pretty straightforward. He's the prophet calling everyone to repent, he's the baptizer preparing the way for someone greater, and he's the martyr who dies for speaking truth to a corrupt king. A nice, clean, three-act play.
But what if I told you that's just one version of the story, and that the historical reality is way more complicated, way more messy, and honestly, way more dangerous than the story you might have heard growing up?
You see, to get to the real John, we have to become historical detectives. We can't just rely on one account. We've got to piece together clues from a bunch of different ancient sources. And here's the catch. Each one was written with its own agenda. All right, let's meet our witnesses. First, you've got the Synoptic Gospels. That's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They all tell a pretty similar story. Then you have the Gospel of John, which, wow, has a very different spin on things. And finally, and this is crucial, we have a non-Christian source, the first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus. They're all looking at the same man, but they paint wildly different pictures.
So, just how different are we talking? Well, when you put these accounts side by side, the differences are just startling. It's almost like you're reading about three completely different people. Okay, just look at this breakdown. It's fascinating. Josephus, our historian, sees John as a popular political leader who could stir up trouble. And get this, he doesn't even mention Jesus in connection with John at all. The Synoptic Gospels, they cast him as this new Elijah figure, a powerful prophet preparing the way. But there's also this hint of tension, of potential rivalry with Jesus. And then there's the Gospel of John, which totally demotes him. He's just a humble messenger, a voice, whose entire purpose is to point to Jesus and then fade into the background.
So, you see, these are not minor details. We're talking about fundamentally different understandings of who this man was and what he was doing. Each author is shaping John's story to fit their own bigger narrative. For the Gospel writers, it was absolutely essential to show that John was secondary to Jesus. For Josephus, the historian, John's religious ideas were less interesting than the political threat he posed.
And nowhere do you see this conflict more clearly than in the story of John's death. We literally have two completely different motives for why King Herod Antipas had him executed.
Let's compare them. On one side, you have the famous Gospel version. It's a tale of court intrigue, a family grudge. John calls out the king's illegal marriage, the new queen holds a grudge, and it all comes to a head with a seductive dance and a gruesome request. But on the other side, you have Josephus's version, which is all about cold, hard political calculation. Herod wasn't angry, he was scared. He feared John's immense popularity could spark a rebellion, so he took him out as a preemptive measure.
And the Gospel version is just brilliant storytelling. It's crafted to be a powerful morality play. It's no accident that it mirrors the old story of the prophet Elijah confronting the wicked King Ahab and his manipulative wife, Queen Jezebel. By casting Herodias as this new Jezebel, the story paints Herod's entire court as corrupt and wicked, turning John's death into this timeless struggle of good versus evil.
But let's hit pause on the palace drama for a second. If we zoom out and look at the political reality of first-century Judea, Josephus's version starts to sound very, very plausible. It turns out John's fate was not an isolated event at all.
This right here is the absolute key to understanding this entire period. In Judea, under the thumb of Rome and its client kings like Herod, if you were a charismatic leader who could draw a big crowd, you were a threat. Period. It didn't even matter if your message was peaceful or religious. A massive following equaled power, and that kind of popular power was seen as a direct challenge to the state.
And look, John was not the only one. This was a pattern. Just a few years after John, a Samaritan prophet gathered followers, and Pontius Pilate had them massacred. Then a guy named Theudas promised to part the Jordan River. He was quickly beheaded. Then another man known as the Egyptian prophet saw his movement completely crushed by Roman soldiers. The message from the authorities was crystal clear. Gather a crowd and you risk your life.
So, when you put all these pieces together, a whole new picture of John the Baptist emerges. The historical John wasn't just a spiritual guide in the wilderness. He was a popular, powerful, and deeply influential figure operating in a political tinderbox.
His call for a new kind of community, his massive following, it all made his execution almost inevitable. His story, and Jesus' story that follows, has to be understood in this incredibly dangerous political world.
Which brings us to a final, pretty challenging question. It's one thing for us to admire John from the safety of 2,000 years, but I want you to really imagine it. You're there. You're standing on the banks of the Jordan. You see the crowds, you feel the excitement, but you also know the rumors. You know what the authorities do to men like him. So hearing his powerful call, would you have been brave enough to follow him into the water?